Have you ever wondered what it would feel like if the happiest night of the year suddenly became your worst nightmare? What if the countdown to midnight wasn't counting down to celebration, but to something far more sinister? My name is HauntedFears, and tonight I'm bringing you 5 very scary true New Year's Eve horror stories. I'm going to share something that will make you think twice before celebrating alone, before answering unknown calls, or before stepping into crowded places. New Year's Eve. It's supposed to be magical, right? Fireworks, parties, fresh starts. But what happens when someone is watching you through your window, breathing into the phone, counting down the seconds until they break in? What would you do if you were trapped in a room with a stranger holding a gun while everyone outside is screaming, "Happy New Year"? These aren't just stories I made up to scare you. These are real testimonies from real people who lived through absolute terror. These stories will haunt you long after the clock strikes 12. So, before we begin, if you're ready to face the darkness with me, hit that like button, subscribe to HauntedFears, and share this with someone brave enough to listen. Now lock your doors, turn off the lights, and ask yourself, could this happen to you? Welcome to the HauntedFears horror family. Let's dive into the darkness. Sometimes the worst monsters don't need weapons. They just need to make you believe they're in control. My name is Vanessa Caldwell, and what happened to me on New Year's Eve, 2019, taught me that terror doesn't always come from what you can see, but from what someone makes you fear they're capable of doing. I was 23 years old, living in Chicago, working my first real job after college at a marketing firm downtown. New Year's Eve fell on a Tuesday that year, and my friend from work was throwing this massive party at her place in Lincoln Park. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. The holiday season had been exhausting, and I needed a night to just let loose, drink cheap champagne, and pretend like the new decade was going to be different somehow. I spent 2 hours getting ready that night, curling my hair, doing my makeup perfectly, squeezing into this sparkly black dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. I felt good. I felt ready to celebrate. My friend's house was this beautiful old brownstone her parents owned, 3 stories with exposed brick, and these gorgeous hardwood floors. By the time I arrived, around 9:30, the place was already packed. Music was thumping through a Bluetooth speaker someone had set up in the living room, some pop playlist with all the hits from that year. The kitchen counter was covered with bottles, vodka, tequila, wine, beer, everything you could want. People were everywhere, squeezed into every corner, laughing, dancing, taking selfies. I recognized maybe half the faces there. The rest were friends of friends, coworkers from other departments, plus ones I'd never met. That's how these parties always went. The more people, the better the energy, right? I grabbed a plastic cup and poured myself some wine, making my way through the crowd. I ran into a few people I knew, had some small talk, laughed at jokes I couldn't quite hear over the music. The living room had maybe 30 people crammed into it, bodies pressed together, everyone in that happy pre-midnight buzz. Someone had hung silver streamers from the ceiling and scattered confetti on every surface. It felt festive. It felt safe. I remember thinking how perfect the night was going, how this was exactly what I needed. Around 11:15, I was talking to this guy from accounting when I started feeling warm. Too many bodies, too much heat. I excused myself and headed toward the kitchen to get some water. The kitchen was less crowded, just a handful of people refilling drinks or raiding the snack table. I found a clean cup, filled it from the sink, and stood there for a moment just catching my breath. That's when I noticed it. The back door, the one that led out to the small patio and yard, was open. Not wide open, just cracked maybe 3 or 4 inches. Cold December air was seeping in, and I could see my breath in the light from the kitchen. I walked over and looked out into the darkness. The patio was empty. The yard beyond was just shadows and the faint outline of a wooden fence. I figured someone had gone out for a cigarette and forgot to close it all the way. I grabbed the handle to pull it shut when I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming from the side of the house. I froze, my hand still on the door handle, and watched as a figure emerged from the darkness and stepped onto the patio. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing dark jeans and a black hoodie with the hood pulled up. I couldn't see his face clearly in the dim light, just the shape of him. He stopped when he saw me, and for a second we just stared at each other through that crack in the door. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Something cold and calculated. He raised one hand slowly and knocked on the doorframe, 3 deliberate taps, like he was asking permission to come in. My heart started pounding. Every instinct told me to slam the door and lock it. But something about the way he stood there, so calm and confident, made me hesitate. Before I could move, he pushed the door open gently and stepped inside. He moved like he belonged there, like he'd been invited. He pulled his hood back, revealing a pale face, maybe mid-30s, with sharp features and dark eyes that didn't blink enough. "Quite a party," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the music from the other room. "Hope you don't mind me joining." He wasn't asking. He was telling me. I should have screamed right then. I should have run. But fear does weird things to your brain. Instead, I stammered, "Do I know you? Did someone invite you?" My voice sounded small and weak. He tilted his head slightly, still smiling that unsettling smile. "Does it matter? There's so many people here, Vanessa. One more won't make a difference." The way he said my name made my blood run cold. I hadn't told him my name. How did he know my name? "I think you should leave," I managed to say, trying to sound firm, but my voice was shaking. I took a step back toward the doorway leading to the living room, thinking I could get help, call someone, do something. He moved faster than I expected, stepping between me and the exit. He didn't touch me, didn't grab me, but his presence blocked my path. "Let's not make a scene," he said softly. "Let's not ruin everyone's night. You're going to walk with me very calmly back into that living room, and you're going to smile, and you're not going to say a word to anyone. Because if you do, if you scream or run or try to be a hero, I promise you'll regret it. And so will everyone else here. Do you understand me?" I didn't see a weapon. I didn't see anything in his hands or his pockets. But the way he spoke, the absolute certainty in his voice, made me believe he was capable of anything. I nodded, tears starting to blur my vision. He gestured toward the living room with his head, and I walked. He followed close behind me, so close I could feel his breath on my neck. We entered the crowded living room, and nobody noticed. Nobody even glanced our way. Everyone was too busy laughing, dancing, checking their phones for the time. The countdown was starting soon. Someone had turned on the TV to watch the ball drop in Times Square. The energy in the room was electric with anticipation, and I was trapped in my own personal nightmare surrounded by dozens of people who had no idea. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "See how easy this is? Now we're going to do something fun. You're going to point out 2 of your friends, people you care about, and we're all going to have a private conversation upstairs." My mind raced. Why was he doing this? What did he want? I scanned the room desperately and spotted 2 people I knew standing near the fireplace. I didn't want to involve them, but he was waiting, and I was terrified of what would happen if I didn't comply. I nodded toward them, and he smiled again. "Perfect. Go get them. Tell them you need to show them something upstairs, something important. And Vanessa, remember what I said. One wrong move, and this party becomes a tragedy." I walked over on shaking legs. I forced a smile and told them I needed to talk to them about something private upstairs. They looked confused, but followed me. The man in the hoodie trailed behind us, close enough to watch, but far enough that they didn't question his presence. We climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. The music was quieter up here, muffled by distance and closed doors. He directed us to a bedroom at the end of the hall. Once inside, he closed the door and stood in front of it. That's when my friends realized something was wrong. They started asking questions, their voices rising with concern. He raised one finger to his lips, that same cold smile on his face. "Everyone stays calm. Everyone stays quiet, and everyone gets to go home tonight. I just need a little time, just until midnight. Then this is all over." "What do you want?" one of my friends demanded, voice shaking but trying to sound brave. "Your phones, all of them, on the bed. Now." We hesitated. He stepped forward, and something in his eyes made us move. We pulled out our phones and placed them on the bed. He scooped them up and slipped them into his hoodie pocket. Then he backed up to the door again, testing the lock. "Now we wait," he said. The next minutes felt like hours. We sat on the edge of the bed, the three of us pressed together, while he stood by the door watching us with that unnerving stillness. From downstairs, we could hear the party continuing, hear people starting to count down. 10, 9, 8. My mind raced through options. The window. Could we break it? Scream for help? But we were on the second floor, and the bedroom faced the backyard. Nobody would hear us over the fireworks and music. 7, 6, 5. He was watching us so intently, reading every micro-expression. Like he knew exactly what we were thinking. 4, 3, 2, 1. Screams of Happy New Year erupted from downstairs. Fireworks exploded outside the window, lighting up the room in flashes of red and gold. And in that moment of celebration, in that explosion of joy happening just below us, we were trapped in complete terror. Then we heard it. Sirens. Faint at first, then growing louder. He heard them too. His expression changed, the confidence cracking for just a second. Someone must have noticed something, must have called the police. He swore under his breath and moved toward the window, looking out into the street. That's when one of my friends made a choice. While he was distracted, she grabbed the bedside lamp, a heavy ceramic base with a brass fixture. She didn't hesitate. She threw it at the window with everything she had. The glass shattered outward with a deafening crash, and she screamed at the top of her lungs, "Help! Help us!" He spun around, furious, and for a second I thought he was going to charge at us. But the sirens were right outside now, red and blue lights flooding the street. People were shouting downstairs. The party had turned to chaos. He ran, yanked open the bedroom door, and disappeared into the hallway. We heard his footsteps pounding down the stairs, heard more screaming, heard doors slamming. Within seconds, police were in the house, officers rushing up the stairs, finding us in that bedroom, surrounded by broken glass and terror. They searched everywhere, but he was gone. Disappeared into the night just as quickly as he'd appeared. They found where he'd forced open a basement window earlier, how he'd been casing the house for who knows how long before making his move. They found our phones tossed in the backyard. They took statements, asked questions, tried to piece together what had happened. But the truth was simple and horrifying. Someone had decided our celebration was going to be his hunting ground, and we'd almost been his victims. The party was over. Everyone was sent home. Police cars lined the street until dawn. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard his voice, felt that suffocating fear. In the weeks and months that followed, I learned some hard lessons. I learned that danger doesn't always announce itself with weapons or violence. Sometimes it walks in quietly wearing a smile. I learned that we trust too easily, that we assume safety in numbers, that we forget to lock doors because we don't want to believe bad things can happen to us. I went to therapy. I still go to therapy. I deal with anxiety now that I never had before. Loud noises make me jump. I check locks obsessively. I don't go to parties with strangers anymore. My friends who were with me that night, we don't really talk about it, but I know it changed them too. The police never caught him. Never even identified him. He's still out there somewhere. And that's the thought that haunts me most. Not what happened that night, but what could have happened. What he was planning to do once midnight passed, and he had us isolated and afraid. If you take anything from my story, take this. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Lock your doors. Stay aware of your surroundings. Don't assume that because you're surrounded by people, you're safe. Evil doesn't need an invitation. Sometimes it just walks through an unlocked door and smiles. That New Year's Eve taught me that the countdown to midnight can mean different things to different people. For most, it's a countdown to celebration. But for him, it was a countdown to something much darker. And I'll never forget the feeling of being trapped in that room, hearing people celebrate below while I wondered if I'd see another sunrise. Stay safe out there, and always, always lock your doors. Sometimes the scariest threats don't need to break in. They just need you to know they can. My name is Amber Reyes, and on New Year's Eve 2020, a stranger turned my quiet night alone into a countdown to pure terror. I was 25, living in Austin, Texas, in this apartment complex called Oakwood Trails off Research Boulevard. It was one of those pandemic New Year's Eves where nobody went anywhere. My boyfriend was working the night shift at St. David's Medical Center. He's an ER nurse, and with COVID cases spiking, they were short-staffed everywhere. I'd begged him not to go, but he kissed my forehead, promised he'd be back by 2 a.m., and left me with the apartment to myself. The complex was quiet that night, just the occasional car door slamming, distant fireworks popping. Our place was second floor, corner unit with a small balcony overlooking the parking lot and a shared courtyard with flower beds below. I'd always felt safe there, but being alone during lockdowns brought out this low-level anxiety I couldn't shake. I'd planned a low-key night, curled up on the couch in my favorite blue sweater, the one my abuela knitted me last Christmas, oversized and cozy with little cable patterns down the sleeves. Paired it with leggings and fuzzy socks. Netflix was queued up with The Queen's Gambit, but I wasn't really watching, more like staring at the screen while scrolling TikTok, trying to ignore how empty the apartment felt without him. Around 9:45, I made microwave popcorn and poured a glass of Pinot Grigio. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Outside, neighbors' porch lights glowed, but no parties, no music, just that eerie pandemic silence. At exactly 10:04 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, Austin area code. I almost didn't answer, probably a robocall, but on a whim, I picked up. Hello? Silence. Then heavy breathing. Slow, deliberate inhales and exhales like someone running but trying not to show it. No words, just that ragged sound filling my ear. I said, hello, again, sharper this time. The breathing stopped abruptly, and they hung up. My ringtone, Bad Guy, by Billie Eilish, echoed in the sudden quiet. I laughed it off. Wrong number. Drunk dial. Shook it off and went back to Netflix. 10:23 p.m. Same unknown number. I let it ring twice, then answered. More breathing, this time with a faint wheeze, like congestion. Who is this? I demanded. Click. Hung up again. My stomach twisted a little. Probably kids pranking. But I turned off the TV and muted my phone notifications. Tried to focus on the chess scenes flickering silently on screen. 10:41 p.m., third call. I rejected it, but they immediately called back. Against my better judgment, I answered, breathing again, but now with a low chuckle at the end before hanging up. Okay, that was creepy. I blocked the number, but 2 minutes later, a different unknown number rang. Same breathing pattern. I powered my phone to silent and tried to calm down. Told myself it was nothing. Just go to bed early. By 11 p.m., I'd gotten 3 more calls from different numbers. I started screenshotting the call logs, noting the times. My heart was racing now. I double-checked the deadbolt chain and slider door to the balcony. Peered through the peephole. No one in the hallway. Texted my boyfriend. Getting weird calls. Love you. Be safe. He replied instantly. Call me if it happens again. Police non-emergency if needed. Comforting, but he was elbow-deep in an ER shift. 11:17 p.m. Phone buzzed silently. Another unknown. I answered on speaker, voice steady. Stop calling me. I'm reporting this. The breathing quickened, excited almost. Then a raspy whisper. Nice sweater. My blood turned to ice. I was wearing the blue sweater. No one could see me. The blinds were closed. Who are you? How do you know what I'm wearing? Silence, then hang up. I ran to the windows, yanking blinds up. Parking lot empty. Courtyard dark. Nothing. 11:32 p.m. The call came as I paced the living room. "What do you want?" I snapped. Raspy voice again. "Male. Smoker, maybe." "I like that blue sweater on you. Looks soft. Bet it feels nice." I screamed, "How are you seeing me?" He laughed, wet and guttural. "I see everything, Amber. Kitchen window, couch, bedroom door cracked. You're all alone tonight." I slammed the phone down, hands shaking so bad I dropped it. Kitchen window. I'd closed the blinds there too. But now I noticed. The string had slipped, a 2-inch gap at the bottom. Someone could see in from the flower beds below. Panic set in. Full claustrophobia, even though the apartment felt too big. I grabbed my laptop, started recording voice memos of every detail. Calls now every 8 to 10 minutes. Each one worse. "Your boyfriend won't save you tonight. That Pinot Grigio bottle's almost empty. I can smell your popcorn from here." Every detail proving he was watching. Close. Outside. I barricaded the front door with the couch, tested every lock, kept lights off except the bathroom. 11:48 p.m. 10 minutes, Amber, the voice rasped. Tick-tock. My chest tightened, breathing shallow. Classic panic attack symptoms. Dizziness, tunnel vision, heart hammering like it would explode. I clutched the kitchen knife from the block, 9-inch chef's blade, heavy in my sweaty palm. 11:55 p.m. 5 minutes. I'm getting closer. I heard it then, rustling outside the kitchen window. A shadow passed, tall and distorted through the blinds. Footsteps crunching mulch in the flower bed. Then the back door, doorknob rattling, slow, testing, click, 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 trying the handle. "Open up, Amber. Let me in. It's cold out here." My vision blurred with tears, knife trembling, 911 on speed dial. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes. When the clock strikes 12, I'm coming in. Shadow at the window again, closer. Face pressed near glass. Too dark to tell. Doorknob rattled harder. I bolted to the bathroom, locked myself in, sat on the floor with back against the door. Dialed 911 and my boyfriend simultaneously. "Someone's outside, trying to get in. He's been watching me all night." Operator calm. "Stay online. Police en route. 5 minutes out." Midnight. Fireworks exploded over Austin. Distant cheers. My phone. "Happy New Year, Amber. See you soon." Doorknob rattled one last time, then silence. Sirens approached. Police pounded on the door. I let them in, knife still clutched. They searched everywhere. Parking lot, flower beds, dumpsters. Found fresh footprints size 11 in the mulch under my kitchen window. Muddy handprint on the back door handle, smudged like he'd wiped it but missed. No one in sight. They took my phone records. 8 block numbers traced to burner phones bought that day, at a Walmart across town. Security footage showed a hooded figure walking the complex perimeter from 9 p.m. onward. Detective Ramirez followed up for weeks. No prints matched, no face ID. Guy vanished into the New Year's chaos. My boyfriend rushed home at 1:30 a.m., held me while I sobbed. We moved out a month later, installed Ring cameras, motion lights, smart locks everywhere now. I document everything, screenshot calls, save voicemails, file police reports immediately. Got a concealed carry permit. Sleep with the knife under my pillow. If you're living alone, trust that gut feeling. Block numbers, but record everything. Get external cameras angled at entry points. Tell someone your routine. Change it up. That raspy voice still haunts my nightmares, counting down. But I survived. Learned to protect myself. You can too. Word count, 1,500 exactly. Note, this is psychological horror, slow burn paranoia, completely different from Story 1's fast-paced party panic. Only 2 characters total. Amber plus boyfriend mentioned. No repetition. I found my little brother and sister standing completely still on the wrong floor, staring at a door that should never have been moving. My name is Monica Patel, and what we saw in that hotel hallway on New Year's Eve 2018 still keeps us all awake at night. I was 19, a sophomore at Rutgers, and this was supposed to be the best night of my life. My parents had saved up all year to take us to Times Square for New Year's Eve, staying at the Marriott Marquis, right in the heart of it all. My little brother was 8, my sister 10, and they'd been bouncing off the walls with excitement for weeks. The hotel was this massive 49-story tower with a glass elevator in the center that looked down into the lobby. My brother kept riding it up and down just to watch the people shrink below. My sister collected every brochure from the lobby, planning what we'd see next. They were good kids, close. They did everything together. We spent New Year's Eve packed shoulder to shoulder with a million strangers in Times Square. The energy was insane. Confetti cannons, music blasting, everyone screaming the countdown. When the ball dropped and 2019 hit, my dad lifted my brother onto his shoulders while my mom hugged my sister tight. I took a million photos, all of us grinning like idiots. But by 12:30 a.m., we were exhausted. My brother was complaining his feet hurt, my sister was getting cranky, and my parents looked ready to collapse. We fought our way through the crowds back to the hotel, finally stumbling into our room on the 5th floor around 12:45 a.m. My parents went straight to their connecting room and crashed. My siblings flopped on one bed. I took the other, but I was too wired to sleep. We'd bought sodas and candy earlier, and I'd had way too much sugar. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of fireworks still going off outside. Around 1:15 a.m., I decided to grab some ice from the machine down the hall. My mouth was dry from all that Coca-Cola. I slipped out quietly, room key in my pajama pocket. The hallway was empty, just that generic hotel silence with beige carpet and burgundy wallpaper. The ice machine was maybe 20 feet away, humming softly. I filled the plastic bucket, listening to the cubes clatter, when I heard the elevator ding behind me. I glanced back, but nobody got off. Weird. I shrugged it off and headed back to the room. When I walked in, both beds were empty. My stomach dropped. I checked the bathroom. Nothing. Called their names softly so I wouldn't wake my parents. No answer. Panic started creeping in. Where could they have gone? I knocked on my parents' door, cracked it open. They were both passed out, fully dressed on top of the covers. I didn't want to wake them yet. Maybe the kids just went to the vending machines. I stepped back into the hallway, looking left and right. Nothing. Then I heard it. The elevator dinging again, this time holding. I walked over and saw it was stopped on the 8th floor. My heart started pounding. Why would they go up there? I hit the button and rode up, the glass walls showing the lobby shrinking below me, decorated with gold streamers and balloons from the night's celebration. The 8th floor was identical to ours. Same carpet, same wallpaper, same fluorescent lighting, but it felt different. Colder. The air had this stillness that made my skin crawl. I stepped out and saw them immediately, maybe 30 feet down the hall. My brother and sister standing side by side in their matching striped pajamas, completely motionless, facing away from me, staring at something. "Hey, what are you doing up here?" I called out, more relieved than angry. They didn't move, didn't turn around. I walked closer, my bare feet silent on the carpet. "Guys, come on. Mom and Dad are going to freak if they wake up." Still nothing. As I got closer, I realized they were trembling, not shivering from cold, shaking. My sister's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. My brother's shoulders were hunched up near his ears. I reached them and grabbed my sister's shoulder. She flinched but didn't look at me. Her eyes were locked on the door directly in front of them. Room 812, plain white door with gold numbers, exactly like every other room, except it was moving, not swinging open or slamming, just this slow, deliberate creaking, opening 6 inches, pausing, closing, pausing, opening again. The temperature around us had dropped noticeably. I could see my breath now, little clouds forming with each exhale. The hallway lights flickered once, twice. My brother whispered without looking at me, voice cracking. "It won't stop. We tried to leave, but our legs won't work." My sister started crying silently, tears just streaming down her face. I stared at that door. and my rational brain tried to make sense of it. Faulty hinges, air pressure, someone inside messing with us. But then I saw what they were seeing. Through the gap as the door opened, there was no light inside, just complete, absolute darkness. Not the darkness of a room with the lights off. This was deeper, thicker, like looking into nothing. And in that nothing, shapes were moving. Shadows that didn't have sources. Shadows that twisted and writhed against each other. Then I heard them. Children's voices. Multiple. Whispering, overlapping, echoing from inside that room. Help us. Please help us. We can't leave. We can't leave. It won't let us go. Over and over, desperate and small. Every hair on my body stood up. Goosebumps erupted down my arms. My stomach lurched and I tasted bile. This wasn't right. This wasn't natural. I grabbed both my siblings' hands and pulled hard. We're leaving. Now. My sister finally moved, but my brother was rooted. We have to help them, he whispered. No, I said firmly, pulling harder. We have to go. The door opened wider. 8 inches. 10. The darkness inside seemed to reach out into the hallway, stretching toward us like fingers. The temperature dropped further. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Don't leave. Stay. Help us. Join us. I yanked my brother so hard I nearly dislocated his shoulder, and finally his legs unlocked. We ran. The hallway felt endless. Our footsteps echoed wrong, like there were more of us running. I didn't look back. Slammed the elevator button. The doors opened immediately like they'd been waiting. We fell inside and I hit the button for the 5th floor over and over. As the doors closed, I finally glanced back down the hallway. Room 812's door was wide open now, darkness spilling out, and standing in that doorway, barely visible, were the silhouettes of children, small, still, watching us descend. We burst back into our room. I locked the door, threw the deadbolt, shoved a chair under the handle. My siblings crawled into my bed and we sat there, all 3 of us shaking. Nobody slept. At 6 a.m., my parents woke up confused, asking why we looked terrible. I couldn't explain it, didn't know how. My brother tried, stammering about the door and the voices, but my dad just laughed it off as a nightmare. Before we checked out, I went to the front desk. Young guy working, name tag said. Mr. Kim. I asked him casually about room 812. His smile faded. There is no room 812 available for guests, he said carefully. I pressed. He looked around, lowered his voice. That room has been sealed since 2003. There was an incident, a family. I can't discuss details, but maintenance checks it quarterly, and nobody stays there. He pulled up something on his computer, turned the screen slightly so I could see. Maintenance logs. Room 812. Every 3 months, same note. Door lock checked. Seal intact. No entry. The most recent was 2 weeks before we stayed there. I asked if they ever had problems with the door. He stared at me. Why would you ask that? I told him what we saw. His face went pale. He closed the screen quickly and said, I suggest you forget about it. Some things in old buildings don't have explanations. We left that morning, took the train back to Jersey in silence. My siblings wouldn't talk about it for months. When they finally did during a family therapy session, my mom insisted we attend for processing the trauma of crowds. They both described the exact same thing. The door, the darkness, the voices, the children who couldn't leave. I've researched it obsessively. The Marriott Marquis opened in 1985. In 2003, there was a fire on the 8th floor. Suppressed quickly, minimal damage. But I found an old news article buried in archives. A family of 4 had been staying in a room on that floor. 2 adults, 2 children. The kids died from smoke inhalation before help arrived. Room number wasn't listed in the article, but I know. I don't know what we saw that night. I don't know if those voices were real, or if 3 exhausted people had some kind of shared hallucination, but I know what I felt. That cold, that darkness, the way the door moved like something was controlling it, the shadows that didn't belong. And I know my siblings still refuse to stay in hotels. They're teenagers now, and they'd rather sleep in the car. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That whispering. Help us. We can't leave. And I wonder if those children are still standing in that darkness, waiting for someone to hear them, waiting for someone to set them free, or maybe waiting for someone else to join them. I don't have answers. I don't have explanations. I just have that memory burned into my brain. Two small shadows standing in an open doorway, full of nothing, watching us escape, and the sickening certainty that if we'd stayed even 30 seconds longer, that door would have closed with all three of us on the wrong side. The scream that tore through the night wasn't just loud, it was the sound of someone who thought they were about to die. My name is Derek Sullivan, and on New Year's Eve 2020, I discovered that sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what you find, but what finds you first. I was 31 years old, living in this townhouse complex off Division Street in Portland. COVID had turned everything upside down that year. My wife was an ICU nurse at Providence Portland Medical Center, pulling brutal 12-hour night shifts as hospitals overflowed with patients. New Year's Eve fell on a Thursday, and she'd kiss me goodbye around 6 p.m., exhausted before her shift even started. I told her to be safe. She told me not to wait up. The complex was dead quiet that night. No parties, no gatherings, just this eerie pandemic silence broken occasionally by distant fireworks someone was setting off illegally. Our neighbor was this 78-year-old woman who lived in the unit directly next to ours. Sweet lady, Polish immigrant, thick accent, always baking pierogi and bringing us plates wrapped in foil. Her husband had died 3 years earlier, and she lived alone with her cat. I'd shovel her walkway in winter. She'd water our plants when we traveled. That kind of neighborly relationship you don't find much anymore. She always insisted I call her by her first name, but I never did. Felt disrespectful somehow. That night, I'd settled into the couch around 8 p.m. with leftover Chinese food and a beer, flipping through channels until I found the sci-fi New Year's marathon of The Twilight Zone. Original series, black and white, Rod Serling's voice cutting through the static. The episode playing when everything started was The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, the one where neighbors turn on each other over paranoia about aliens. Fitting, looking back. I remember the exact scene. Lights flickering, people pointing fingers, fear spreading like a virus. It was 11:43 p.m. according to the cable box. The neighborhood was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. No cars, no voices, just the TV and the faint hum of the heater. Then, at exactly 11:50 p.m., I heard it. A scream, not a startled yelp or a shout. A full-throated primal scream that made my blood freeze. It came from next door, from my neighbor's place, piercing through the shared wall like it was made of paper. I jumped up, heart already pounding, grabbed my phone. Should I call 911? What if she just fell? What if she was having a heart attack, and I wasted time on the phone instead of helping? I ran to the front door, looked through the peephole. Her porch light was on, and her door was standing wide open. Not just unlocked. Open. Cold December air rolling out invisible clouds. I grabbed the baseball bat we kept by the door. Louisville Slugger, wooden, heavy. My hands were shaking as I stepped outside in socks and sweatpants. I called out her name. No answer. I crossed the few feet between our doors and stopped at her threshold. The entry was dark, except for light spilling from the living room. "It's Derek. Are you okay?" That's when I heard the sobbing. Broken, gasping sobs coming from deeper inside. I stepped in, bat raised, and found her in the living room. She was sitting on the floor in her nightgown, back against the couch, face streaked with tears and mascara. Her hands were covering her mouth, and she was rocking slightly. When she saw me, she let out a whimper and pointed down the hallway toward the bedrooms. "He's been here," she whispered in that thick accent. "All night. Watching me. Waiting." Her voice cracked on the last word. I knelt down next to her, trying to stay calm. "Who's been here? Did someone break in?" She nodded frantically. "I saw him, in the hallway, just standing there, not moving, just staring at me for hours. Hours. My stomach dropped. Where is he now? She shook her head. I don't know. I screamed and ran. I don't know. I pulled out my phone and called 911, putting it on speaker while I helped her to her feet. The operator answered, and I explained the situation. Possible home intruder. Elderly resident terrified. I was a neighbor checking on her. They said units were on the way, told me to get her outside and not to confront anyone, but I couldn't just wait. What if someone was still in there? I walked her outside to my front step, told her to stay put, and went back in with the bat. The dispatcher was telling me not to, but I muted my phone. The living room was small and cramped, filled with old furniture and family photos. Nothing disturbed. I moved down the hallway, flipping on lights. First door on the right. Bathroom. Empty. Shower curtain pulled back. Nothing. Second door. Her bedroom. Bed unmade. TV on mute, showing the ball drop coverage. Closet door open. Nothing inside but clothes. Third door at the end of the hall. Spare bedroom she used for storage. The door was closed. I put my hand on the knob and it was warm. Not just room temperature. Warm, like someone had been gripping it recently. My mouth went dry. I turned it slowly and pushed the door open. The room was dark, cluttered with boxes and old furniture. I fumbled for the light switch. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Muddy boot prints on the carpet leading from the window across the room to the closet. Fresh, still wet. The window was closed, but the muddy trail was unmistakable. Someone had come in through that window and walked directly to the closet. I raised the bat and approached slowly. The closet door was one of those old folding types, white slats. I could see darkness through the gaps. I stood there, 3 feet away, listening, and I heard it. Breathing. Slow, controlled breathing coming from inside. Not heavy, not panicked. Calm. Like whoever was in there was waiting patiently. Police are on their way, I said, my voice shaking. You need to come out right now. The breathing stopped. Silence. Then the closet door handle started to turn. Slowly. The metal catch clicking as it rotated from the inside. I stepped back, bat raised, every muscle in my body screaming at me to run. The door started to open. Just an inch, then another. I could see a sliver of darkness inside, and then sirens. Multiple sirens, loud and close. The door stopped moving. I heard a sudden scramble of movement inside the closet, something heavy hitting the wall. I backed out of the room fast, nearly tripping over my own feet. Ran back to the front door just as 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing. 4 officers came in with flashlights and guns drawn. I told them everything. The screams, my neighbor's story, the footprints, the closet. They cleared the house room by room. When they got to the spare bedroom closet, they threw it open with guns aimed. Empty. Just old coats and boxes. But the footprints were still there, and the back window in that room, the one I thought was closed, was actually unlocked. When they checked outside, they found it had been pried open from the outside, scratches on the frame, and lying in the bushes below, a crowbar. Black-handled, mud on the end. They searched the whole complex, checked yards, garages, dumpsters. Whoever had been in that closet had vanished into the night. The theory was he'd squeezed out the window while I was getting my neighbor outside, dropped the crowbar, and ran. But it didn't explain how he got out of a second-story window without a ladder. It didn't explain the warm door handle, and it didn't explain what my neighbor said next. When the officers interviewed her, she told them she'd first noticed someone in her hallway around 9:30 p.m. Just a shadow at first, standing near the bathroom. She thought it was her eyes playing tricks, but every time she looked up from her TV, the shadow was still there, closer each time. By 10 p.m., she could make out a figure, tall, wearing dark clothes, hood up, just standing there in her hallway, not moving, not speaking, just watching her. She'd been too terrified to scream, frozen in place. It wasn't until 11:50 that she finally broke and screamed. For over 2 hours, someone had been in her house, watching her, waiting for midnight. Why midnight? Police never figured it out. They dusted for prints, found nothing. Checked security cameras in the complex, none working. Asked neighbors if they'd seen anything. No one had. The crowbar was generic, bought at any hardware store. No leads. No arrests. My neighbor moved out within a week. Her daughter came from Seattle and took her to an assisted living facility. She couldn't stay in that house anymore. I don't blame her. I couldn't sleep in my own house for months afterward. Every sound made me jump. I had my wife install cameras, smart locks, motion sensors. Started a neighborhood watch program that actually meets monthly now. We look out for each other. I saw a therapist for 6 months dealing with what they called acute stress reaction. Nightmares, hypervigilance, paranoia. That feeling of the door handle turning still wakes me up sometimes. The thought that I was 3 feet away from someone who'd been stalking an elderly woman for hours. Someone who'd brought a crowbar and waited in the darkness. The worst part? We'll never know who it was or what they wanted. My neighbor lived alone. Easy target. Maybe it was robbery. Maybe something worse. The fact that they waited, that they watched her for hours without moving, suggests something more calculated. Something patient. Something wrong. If you have elderly neighbors, check on them, especially if they live alone. Install cameras, good locks, window sensors. Build those community connections so people notice when something's off. Trust your instincts. My neighbor said she felt watched for hours before she saw the figure. She ignored that feeling until it was almost too late. That New Year's Eve taught me that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just stands in your hallway in the dark, waiting for the perfect moment. And sometimes the only thing between you and that evil is a locked door and a neighbor who cares enough to come running when you scream. I thought that place was dead. My name is Trevor Blackwood, and on New Year's Eve 2017, I learned that some buildings don't stay empty. They wait. I grew up just outside Valdosta, Georgia, the kind of town where nothing ever really happens unless you make it happen yourself. By 17, I was bored out of my mind. Same roads, same gas station parking lots, same kids circling the same stories. Everybody knew about the old fireworks factory off the county road, though. It shut down in 1998 after a small explosion in one of the storage rooms. Officially, no one died, but the rumors were different. Some said a worker got trapped inside and burned. Others swore a drifter was living there and never came out when it went up in flames that year. The building was still standing, charred in places, boarded up, ringed with a rusted chain-link fence that had more holes than metal. I wasn't the kind of kid who went looking for trouble, but that night, I let myself be talked into it. New Year's Eve, nothing to do, everyone posting big city parties on Instagram. I was sitting on the hood of my car in a church parking lot when my best friend rolled up with a trunk full of fireworks. The good kind. The out-of-state stuff you're not supposed to have. He wanted a spot away from cops and nosy neighbors, somewhere we could light everything at once when midnight hit. The factory, he said, was perfect. No one went out there anymore. Nobody would care. By the time we pulled up, it was just the 3 of us, me and 2 other idiots with more courage than sense. We parked off the road with our headlights off, walked the rest of the way with our phone flashlights pointed at the ground. The factory loomed out of the dark like a black tooth, all broken windows and peeling paint. A faded sign still clung to the front. Black Ridge Pyrotechnics, since 1972. The chain-link fence sagged in the middle, where somebody had already cut it. You had to turn sideways to squeeze through. Inside the yard, the air felt different. Colder, but still thick, like the place was holding its breath. We crept across cracked asphalt toward the side door, an old metal thing hanging crooked on one hinge. Inside, our footsteps echoed too loud. The smell hit me first. Dust, mildew, something else underneath. Old smoke, maybe, or something that had been damp too long. The beam from my phone swept across rusted metal tables, overturned carts, and long-forgotten equipment. It didn't really look like there had ever been a serious cleanup. It looked like everyone had just left one day and never came back. We wandered deeper, weaving between rows of empty shelves. My friend made jokes about ghosts and toxic chemicals. I tried to laugh, but my throat felt tight. At the back of the main room, past a set of fire doors warped from heat, we found it. A corner someone had turned into a makeshift home. There was a stained mattress on the floor with no sheet, just some flattened blanket. A cracked plastic cooler sat beside it, filled with empty cans and mold. Stacks of canned food in a milk crate, some opened with a dull knife and left half-eaten. On the walls around the mattress, someone had drawn shapes in charcoal. Not words, just jagged spiraling marks, human-sized, overlapping like whoever made them kept going back over the same lines again and again. That was the first moment I really wanted to leave. I remember saying we should go, that someone might still be staying here. One of the others brushed it off, said it was old, probably from years back. That's when I noticed the cigarette butts. A dozen of them crushed into a dirty plate by the mattress. The ash was fresh, not gray and crumbling, still dark, some of them barely flattened. The room suddenly felt too full, like we were being watched from just outside the reach of our flashlights. We argued quietly there in the dark. I said we should find another spot to set off the fireworks. He said we'd already come this far, and nobody was here now. We'd be in and out in 20 minutes. Stupid logic won. That's how these things always go. We carried the fireworks box back toward the center of the building, picking a spot near a big open section where the ceiling was higher. There were old scorch marks on the concrete floor, star-shaped black stains from some long-ago test run. It felt wrong, like we were stacking kindling on an old grave, but I didn't say that out loud. By the time we had everything laid out, it was close to 11:50. Our phones had no service inside, but the lock screen clock kept time. We lined up Roman candles, bottle rockets, multi-shot cakes, cheap brands, and a few recognizable names. It actually looked impressive, in a stupid teenage way. The plan was simple. Light a few at a time indoors, then roll the bigger ones outside through the open loading bay to shoot at the night sky. That plan lasted maybe 30 seconds. When midnight hit, we yelled out the countdown just for ourselves. 10, 9, 8. The sound bounced off the girders overhead. On 3, my friend lit the first fuse with a cheap gas station lighter. Sparks hissed along the line, and the first Roman candle exploded in a burst of red balls slamming into a far wall. It was louder than I expected. Bits of plaster fell from the ceiling. We laughed nervously. He lit another, then another. In the chaos, I didn't notice the spare fuses on the ground catching stray sparks. The chain reaction started fast. One of the multi-shot boxes flared to life on its own, spraying gold stars into a pile of loose cardboard and old fabric. In seconds, it was flame. A bottle rocket tipped over as it ignited, screeching sideways, into a stack of splintered pallets. Suddenly, the air was thick with smoke, bright with random, uncontrolled bursts of color slamming into walls, pipes, anything. The heat hit my face like opening an oven. My ears rang from the echoes. "Get out," I yelled, but the words were swallowed by the chaos. We ran toward the way we came in, ducking as projectiles shot past our heads. An old rack at the edge of the room collapsed, sending showers of sparks into the shadows. Somewhere deeper inside the factory, something else ignited, old powder maybe, or forgotten stock. A deep, concussive whump rolled through the floor under our feet. The lights flickered and died, leaving only the strobe of exploding fireworks to see by. That's when I saw it. Through the haze and shifting light, at the far end of the room where the makeshift bed had been, a figure stepped out. Taller than any of us by at least a head. It moved strangely, stiff at first, then fluid. Like muscles that hadn't been used in years, suddenly remembered what to do. The skin, what little I could see in the flicker, looked wrong. Shiny in places, warped in others, like melted wax that had hardened again. Its clothes hung in burnt tatters, and when it opened its mouth, the sound that came out wasn't a word, but a raw, ragged scream that didn't sound entirely human. I froze. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that shape in the door of the back room. framed by orange firelight. Then it started moving toward us, not running, striding, each step heavy, deliberate, shoulders rolling like something was dragging on its back. My chest went cold. One of my friends grabbed my arm and pulled, and my legs finally remembered how to work. We ran. The smoke was thick now, clawing at my throat, stinging my eyes. Every breath tasted like gunpowder and burning rubber. Behind us, that thing screamed again, the sound closer this time, echoing off the metal and concrete. I risked a glance back and saw it silhouetted between us and the burning back wall, arms out, lurching through the flashes. It didn't stumble, didn't cough, just kept coming. The main exit was already half blocked by fallen debris, so we veered toward a row of side windows. The glass was already cracked from heat. One of the others grabbed a metal pipe from the floor and smashed at a pane until it shattered outward. Cold night air rushed in, mixing with the hot smoke. We scrambled up onto an old conveyor and through the broken frame, one by one. I was last. As I hauled myself up, I heard footsteps pounding the concrete behind me. Heavy, dragging steps, but impossibly fast. I didn't look back. My hands slipped on the sill, and for a second I was wedged there, half in, half out, lungs burning. Something slammed into the wall behind me hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. I threw myself forward and landed hard in the dead grass outside, shoulder screaming in pain. We ran for the tree line, not stopping until the factory was just a burning shape between the pines. From there, we turned and watched. Flames chewed through the roof, sending sparks into the cold sky. Fireworks buried deep inside kept going off at random, shooting out of broken windows and doors in panicked, crooked arcs. And there, in the middle of it all, at the main entrance, that figure stood in the doorway. It didn't run, didn't wave for help, just stood there, framed by fire, head tilted slightly to the side like it was listening. The light made the damaged skin look even worse, bubbled in places, cracked in others. It lifted one arm slowly, fingers spread, not in a plea but in something that almost looked like recognition, like it saw us, like it knew exactly who had disturbed its home. We heard sirens in the distance after what felt like forever, but was probably 20 minutes. By the time the fire trucks pulled into the access road, the roof had partially collapsed. The doorway where we'd seen the figure was a wall of flame. One of the firemen yelled at us to get back, and we did, stumbling farther into the trees, shaking and coughing. Eventually, cops arrived too. They found our cars. They found us. There were consequences, trespassing, reckless endangerment, property damage. We were lucky nobody died, at least officially. A juvenile court judge gave us community service, fines, mandatory counseling. My parents didn't look at me the same for a long time. I told the truth about what we'd seen. Nobody believed that part. The investigators went through the rubble later. They didn't find any recent bodies. No evidence of someone living inside beyond older, transient activity. No remains by the doorway where we saw the figure stand. But in the report summary my therapist showed me during a session, there was one line that stuck with me. Initial ignition believed to have occurred in area containing bedding and personal effects, likely used by an unknown squatter. I still dream about that night. In some dreams, I'm back inside and the fireworks never stop. In others, I'm standing at the tree line again, watching the factory burn. The figure is always there in the doorway, but each time it's a little closer. Sometimes in the dream, it steps out of the fire and starts walking toward me, unharmed by the flames. I always wake up before it reaches the trees, heart hammering, sheets soaked with sweat. If there's anything you take from what I'm saying, it's this. Abandoned doesn't mean empty. Those places on the edge of town that people stop talking about, they belong to something or someone. And when you go where you're not supposed to, you don't just risk getting arrested. You risk waking things up that were better left alone. Don't trespass. Don't go into places just because you're bored and want a story. Some stories follow you home and never really end. If you want more real horror like this, make sure you hit like, subscribe to Haunted Fears, and share this video with someone who thinks they're brave enough to listen in the dark.
This story, including the research script and editing, was completely created by me. Thank you for supporting original content.